Cameron Rodger, Managing Director of Entain, New Zealand. Welcome to my podcast.
Thanks for having me, mate. How's things?
Really, really good. I'm so pleased you're here. So, full disclosure, I've got a partnership starting shortly with your new app called Betcha. So we thought we'd start this partnership by having you on so we can rip the Band-Aid off and address any concerns that some people may have about what you do.
Fantastic, mate.
Yeah. First of all, are you the bad guy?
I certainly don't think so. No, not at all. I mean, look, I think, racing obviously and wagering's been a big part of our identity down here in New Zealand for a long time. But look, hopefully today we can cover off a little bit of how that's all evolved, I think, in a way that maybe not everyone in the audience would have been across. So looking forward to getting into some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, we'll focus on you for a little bit. So you went to law school, got a law degree.
Yeah.
What was your intention when you went to law? Did you see yourself like being a criminal lawyer? What was the plan?
Lack of better idea was probably So I was a horrendous student. Some of my peers probably who might watch this would still be mind blown about the fact I actually went to university, let alone to law school. But yeah, I was playing footy, and that was kind of my dream to be an All Black, like many young men. Had the sort of slight disadvantage I wasn't very good, so I had to kind of quickly scramble to find a different sort of plan. And yeah, I guess I know it sounds a bit crazy, but I sort of used to love arguing and debating with people, and then someone sort of said, well, why don't you try your hand at law school? So, yeah, I went along there and bumbled my way through a degree and, managed to get out the other side and get a law degree. So that was sort of the origin story there. Mm-hmm. Also learned along the way that I would rather do basically anything else with my life than be a lawyer. So I had to kind of pivot and find something else to do and, found my way to the TAB actually.
It's funny. I know maybe 3 or 4 people that have got law degrees that are redundant. Yeah. They get the degree and don't use them.
Yeah.
I mean, were you just before you said a lot of your peers would be surprised? Is that just, are you being modest, or were you a shit student?
No, I was genuinely a very bad student. So I went to school in Onehunga there, so I'm an Auckland boy. Certainly to the point that it was almost comical when I was at school. I don't know. I thought I was a bad student. I was disruptive. I was late on assignments. I barely scraped through at school academically. But I don't know. It was an interesting time.
Mm-hmm. It's funny when you get older and you see people that you had very low expectations of get into like really good positions and jobs. Like, I find that the older I get, like I've got a mate who's got the nickname Doofus, who's like a pediatric surgeon. It's like, oh my God, that guy, I wouldn't want him operating on anyone's kid.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I think maybe in surgery it's a little different, but I say it to my team all the time, like, there's diminishing returns on being clever after a while, like there's certainly when I look to hire people, there's a lot of really smart people out there. That's easy to find, but looking for judgment, a bit of empathy, a bit of like all the soft skills really, like the soft skills are the hard skills, So it's interesting because a lot of people who you might have written off at school sort of ended up doing okay, depending on what the definition of okay is,
It's quite cool though, It's refreshing to see. Yeah. So you get your law degree, then you're working for the New Zealand Racing Board for like 7 years.
Yeah.
What did that job involve?
I guess the way I sort of landed in it, I've always loved. I used to tell people I was into racing, but I've always loved punting. Even when I was young, me and we talk about it all the time, but me and my sister would bet on everything against each other. So, who could finish dinner first, who could stand in the rain the longest, whatever it might be. So, when I realised that being a lawyer looked like basically the worst thing in the world to me, all due respect to the lawyers out there, I thought, well, what am I interested in? And the TAB was sort of it. So. Sent like a cold email I figured out how to put this email addresses together and sent a cold email to the then CEO and said, hey, like I've got this law degree I don't like, but I've always been interested in the TAB. Is there anything that I might be able to do over there? And the one upshot I had at the time was I actually started my life when I was at uni working in a retail store for the TAB. So I was an operator at the coalface, I guess. And they sort of liked that I'd reached out and whatnot, and they just found something for me to do for a few years. So I was kicking around there, sort of writing strategy docs for them as a graduate. That was sort of my start, my way in, if that makes sense.
Where did your love of punting come from? You mentioned the competitive thing with your sister, but like, was it a parent or a grandparent?
Yeah, I mean, probably not too dissimilar to what other people will tell you. Like, trackside was sort of the soundtrack of my childhood. Not so much my parents, but my uncles and cousins and everyone, they were always into racing. And yeah, I guess that's what they're doing. So you form an interest in it. And they were always punting, and so I got the same kind of habits, I suppose, picked up. And yeah, it just never stopped. It's always been a part of kind of my world, if that makes sense.
So, you become head of legal at TAB in 2020. Finally, the law degree gets some use.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
What does that mean? What does that job mean?
Well, it's funny because I was kicking around sort of writing these strategy docs, and I loved it, because I'd always been into punting and whatnot, and I wasn't having to do the law thing, so that was a plus. But then I met a woman called Jess Meach, who was the general counsel at the TAB, so the chief legal honcho, and she kind of found out I had a law degree, which I think she thought was quite funny at the time. And so I had a coffee with her, and she said, well, why don't you come and do some work? And I sort of said, well, I didn't really ever plan on using it. And she's like, look, it's different in the in-house world, And I said, oh, okay. So I sort of started doing a bit of work around the edges with her. And yeah, I started to really enjoy it. I think she was right. It is a very different experience being a lawyer within a business as opposed to a corporate lawyer at one of the big firms. You are sort of... My experience was you're part of the team, you are working on commercial kind of stuff, but you just have that legal lens that sits over the top of it. So, yeah, I managed to work for her and sort of climb the ranks as an in-house lawyer for a while, and that was my background as a lawyer. Yeah.
Yeah. So like head of legal at TAB, like what are you sort of dealing with on a day-to-day basis? Are you dealing with like banning people, or are you dealing with complaints, or what is it?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, so the thing people maybe don't realise about the TAB is that it's a really big business. So, we're the second largest retailer in New Zealand, for example.
Really?
Yeah.
Who's number one?
Well, it used to be Lotto. So potentially they are number one. But when you think about our retail business, we have standalone stores, of which there are 45 or so. And then we also have, I guess, pub and club TABs that are part of another person's store. So if you add all those together, I mean, we're in 500 plus venues around New Zealand, which is the biggest retailer. And then we're also the biggest broadcaster. So we actually broadcast more live sport in the form of racing than anyone else. And then, of course, we run the wagering business. We have big corporate functions. So we're kind of a massive business. I think that maybe not everyone properly connects all of these things together. But, in a business of that size, there's always legal things that need to be dealt with, contracts that need to be read and signed, disputes with operators and, commercial partners, customers, whatever it might be, rights agreements with, big offshore sports and racing providers, all that sort of stuff came into play. So, yeah, there was more than enough work to go around for the sort of three of us in the legal team. And, it was just sort of my day-to-day work.
So since you've been managing director, there's been a huge change. It's gone from TAB to Entain.
Yeah.
So what is Entain? Where's Entain from?
Yeah, so look, Entain is, Entain's a global sort of global business. The parent company's based in the UK. But the Entain that people probably hear a bit more about down here is a little bit of an offshoot of that. So we call it Entain AUNZ. So Entain Global, as part of its team, has this business, Entain Australia and New Zealand. So in Australia, our brands are Ladbrokes and Neds, and down here in New Zealand, it's TAB and now Betcha. And we run pretty independently of the Entain kind of global stuff. We sort of do our own thing down here, but are part of the Entain ecosystem. And look, we came in. I was actually still at the TAB at the time, so I don't know. Most people don't know too much about the TAB, but the sort of way it was set up in New Zealand, the TAB funds racing and sport, right? So it's actually a quasi-public entity. It's not set up to make substantial profit. It's set up to generate funding for sport and racing. I believe it's still the biggest funder of sport outside of the government, and definitely is the full funder of racing. And so the TAB was sort of struggling with the settings that we had in place, right? It's sort of this quasi-commercial government entity that's trying to compete with big offshore operators for business, and it just wasn't working. I mean, there wasn't enough being generated. The TAB was losing market share to offshore operators, etc. And so the executive team at the time, which I was a part of, decided we needed a new plan. And so that was when we looked at getting a partnership involved with Entain to come in. And that's basically what's happened.
So how much did they pay? Was that commercially sensitive?
No, that's out there in the world. So The deal with Entain was a significant upfront payment, so 100 million was paid up front, and that was basically, look, racing and sport were in bad shape, and I guess the way the economy was going, it wasn't going to get any better anytime soon. So that funding went basically towards stabilising those funding streams for them, and then we effectively guaranteed distributions at sort of 150 million a year for the next 5 years, and that just gave funding certainty to racing and sport at a higher level than the TAB was ever going to deliver. So it basically shored up the sort of immediate financial future, and I guess our job now is to build, beyond that 5 years and make sure that, racing and sport continues to get that funding increasing year on year, and we grow the category, if that makes sense.
Because over the last 6 months, people listening to this may have heard ads on podcasts or seen ads on TV or YouTube pre-roll or even old school like newspaper ads and things and billboards.
Yeah.
The sexy new TAB ads are everywhere with the wet, wet, wet song "Love Is All Around."
Yeah.
Called Hunches All Around. Is that part of Entain? Is that sort of?
Yeah, that's certainly part of what we've been doing. So we refreshed the TAB brand. It was a bit old and tired, and we got a marketing team to tell us how those 3 letters should look, which was good. And yeah, we did some new ads.
How much did they charge you for the logo? Like
I don't know.
$100,000 logo.
I want to know how much they charged me for the 10 pages before they show me it that tells me how I should feel about it. If that makes sense, But no, we put those new ads out. Just trying to put TAB in a different kind of light. I think that certainly my perspective on TAB, it's going back a few years, was sort of old white male, stale, tired, kind of just needed it. It was in need of something different. So the Hunch campaign was very much aimed at presenting it in a different way, and yeah, it's been pretty well received thus far.
Well, I think every big brand or organisation goes through this at some point, where you need to like re-energise or reinvigorate the brand, and it was probably just the time for TAB. Yeah, but I'm similar. There was a guy that lived over the road from us called Les, and he worked at National Bank Monday to Friday. Then on Saturday he'd have his stubbies on with a best bets in the back pocket, handlebar moustache, usually wandering around the yard with a transistor. Loved a punt.
Yeah, well, mate, those stories are, everywhere, right? I talk about it all the time. I think one thing I always encourage our staff to do when they start on with TAB, if they haven't been around, is to go into a TAB on a Saturday afternoon, right, and just see the characters that are there. Like, it really is a community of people, If you're into racing and you're a punter, you have like an instant connection with someone else who is, and kind of the universal symbol of that's what you were was the best bet sticking out of the back pocket, which was classic. I had one in my back pocket in sixth form. That was kind of me. So I can spot them a mile away.
Yeah. Okay, so what is Betcha? So I'm doing a partnership with Betcha. They're sponsoring the podcast for a little bit. What exactly is Betcha?
Yeah. So I guess if you think about it, we had TAB in the market, and TAB as a brand is very as much as I say it was old and tired and whatnot, it needed a refresh. It has great recall with New Zealanders. Most people know what the TAB is. It's got a customer group that's quite loyal and sort of committed, but it doesn't really service, like, I guess, the next generation of customers. And look, some of the stats that we had to think about when we came into the market, there's about 190 million of gambling losses that are going offshore at the moment. So primarily with one of our overseas competitors based in Malta and Bet365, and we had to take a look at why customers were choosing to bet there instead of with us. And one of the major problems was that the TAB brand didn't resonate with the younger demographic. And when I say younger, because I know it's a term you have to be cautious with, it's obviously people who are of gambling age, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But under, in our world, younger is under 40. That's kind of what we're talking about. And yeah, we knew that we had to put something in market that still looked after our existing customers who have been there and who've been loyal in the TAB, but then gave the next generation of punters a brand that they can kind of get behind. One of the big stats I use all the time is here in Auckland. It's the largest or second largest it's the second most populated city in terms of migrants. So most people who live here now are not born here, and they have no affinity with the TAB brand. They're looking for something that they can be a part of, that they can resonate with, and Betcha is our attempt at giving them a new look, if that makes sense.
Yeah. How do you feel? You mentioned those some of the international stuff. How do you feel about that? Because I got an email a couple of weeks ago from, I think it's N1, N1 Betcha.
Yeah.
Asking me if I wanted to like be an influencer for them, and I see ads on YouTube all the time with. I saw one the other day with Jamie Foxx.
Yeah.
There was one with Brendan McCullum for a while. How do you feel about that? Using like big celebrities for these things?
Oh, I mean, look, it's not so much the use of the big celebrities that worries me with these offshore brands. It's that, the way that the legislative settings have been here in New Zealand for ages is that they're allowed to operate here with almost impunity. So, when we operate, we have a whole series of rules we have to follow. We have to put safer gambling standards in. We have to have relationships with the government and with like community leaders and whatnot. These operators don't abide by any of that, so they can put ads into market with absolute impunity, and I would say that in many cases they push things way, way, way too far through use of not just use of celebrities, because that's not necessarily the problem, but I looked at the X1 ad, I can't remember the name of it, but the ads that Brendan McCullum was in for a while there, portraying him as a lavish kind of successful person through his betting. That's just not something we could ever do down here or would ever want to do down here. But the fact that they were able to do that and push it so hard in New Zealand is a real fault in the legislative settings as we see it. Yeah,
because they're not having to play by the same rules.
No, they're not. And you think about, when we think about our products, we have to give regard to, things like vulnerable communities, which in the gambling world is Māori and Pacific, right, where they're disproportionately harmed by gambling activity. We have to think about how our ads will be received within those communities. We have to consult. We do consult with them to understand, will this resonate? What are different ways that we can access, those groups? And do we think that X1 are doing any of this? Like, absolutely not. They have no regard for our communities down here. And it's just a massive hole that, in our view, really does need to be solved pretty quickly. And the growth of offshore gambling is insane. It's exponentially growing, and the fact that we have no visibility over how those customers are betting and whether they're doing it safely or whether they're being monitored is a real cause for concern.
Yeah, speaking of that being monitored thing, so I signed up to Betcha just last week. It was a surprise. It was thorough, but it was still surprisingly easy, even for a boomer like me. It was like a 5-minute process. I needed to take a photo of the front and back of my driver's license, photo and all that. And then there were some questions like, how much would you spend on average? What would be a big bet? Is that so I can be monitored? So if there's a regular patterns, then it'll be picked up by someone. Yeah,
spot on. I mean, it's twofold. So your ID is obviously to make sure that you're of age and that's validated. And then we've got some secondary questions which you described. They have two purposes. One is for anti-money laundering, so to make sure you're not doing anything you shouldn't in that regard. And then to give our team a cross-reference point as well to what normal behaviour could look like for you. It's not a firm marker because we put our own objective test around every customer. But if you say you're only going to be spending $10 a week and all of a sudden you're spending $50, well, that's a flag for us to make sure that we check in and see what's going on and why that might have changed.
Even with a smallish amount like that, say $10 to $50.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I know it's something that gets talked about a little bit, but the value that someone bets both ways is not really in and of itself a great marker for potential gambling harm, right? So, I watched the Michael Jordan documentary and I thought he was at pains trying to point it out to people, but I've lived this and can see it, right? So, $20,000 to Michael Jordan is like $10 to an average person.
It's loose change down the side of the sofa.
And it genuinely is, right? And one thing that we struggle with is trying to talk to maybe the regulator, or if there's a public story about someone who's bet and lost a large sum of money, but we know for a fact that relative to their net worth is absolutely not a problem for them. It's an interesting kind of part of the game, and it goes the other way. So, if someone's losing $50 a week, but we know that they can't afford to be losing that, that's a lot of money for a lot of people, particularly in this climate, then absolutely it becomes a marker. The story I do tell when I was working in this space full time, we had a customer, and so what we would do is, we'd have sort of weekly check-ins with certain customers if there were markers that we had to keep an eye on and check how they're going. And we had this one customer, I'll call him Mr. X, Mr. X, who we had actually asked for a source of wealth, so basically making sure that he was financially sound, just given the levels he was betting at, and all of that had come through. And he had basically a bank account that had 20 million plus in it. He had a few other assets. So this is the type of scale we're talking about. But the team came to me on the Monday and said, you probably have to chat to Mr. X again. I said, why? And they said, he lost 200,000 over the weekend. Which it sounds to me or you is insane.
It's terrifying.
Right? Terrifying. And I was like, okay, shoot. Yeah, let me get hold of him. So I ring him. We suspend his account, which is what we'll do. Ring him 4 or 5 times, leave messages, no answer. Just leave it suspended. He'll call me. So he calls me back that night, and he said, hello. He's like, hello, Cam. And I was like, hey. I was like,
you're on a first name basis.
Yeah, for sure. We used to chat all the time. I said, I'm Mr. X, the team let me know that you had a bad week, and he genuinely just says, what? And I was like, you lost 200, is everything all right? And he sort of started to get grumpy, and he was like, yeah, everything's fine. He said, can I swear? He said, what the fuck's the problem? And I was like, well, Mr. X, 200,000 is a lot of money to some people. And then he just pauses, and he goes, fuck being one of those people. And so this is what we do. And in all seriousness, he was very financially sound. He was aware of what he was doing. He wasn't showing any chasing behaviors or other markers that would be problematic. It was just a lot of money. But to him, it wasn't a lot of money. That's like the average person in the street losing $2, So, yeah, it's always a tough one to kind of deal with the sort of focus or not focus on the monetary value. But it's part of how we look at it all.
Yeah, I suppose for him to get the same adrenaline rush, he needs, more skin in the game potentially.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's been my experience with punting. Like the way I've always gambled is I have to feel something, good or bad. And so, my experience has been just stepping up, I guess, the amount that I wager as my income allows for it. That's a natural part of the process for me, and for others as well.
How many people like Mr. X are you calling every Monday?
Oh, no, not many. To be clear, there aren't many people who wager at that level. And look, a massive part of our objective down here in New Zealand and in general is to get away from a reliance on high-value customers. It's easy to say because everyone wants a recreationalized customer base, but just for the reasons that it does require constant attention, it requires, monitoring, it requires thinking about how and when they're gambling, whereas we can usually manage it a lot better in relation to customers who are spending what we can see as truly discretionary amounts. Basically the way we'll talk about it as a team is if you've got $20 on a Friday to spend on some form of entertainment, we want to win that dollar. We want you to put a same game multi on the league or whatever else. That's our dream in terms of a customer base because it is infinitely easier to manage.
Now, my personal betting habits are probably like this. Maybe $100 to $200 a year, Melbourne Cup, a couple of All Black games, maybe a Parker fight.
Yep.
Maybe some UFC. Am I? What percentage of customers are like me, and are we a pain in the ass?
No, you're a fantastic group of customers. I mean, I think the average spend on gambling in New Zealand per year is about at the $60 mark, and that includes Lotto, which takes up a huge, and pokies, which take up a huge proportion of it. Certainly not all coming our way. But look, I mean, your experience is an entirely common one. Combat sports especially get a lot of one-off attention. The Melbourne Cup sort of does get everyone having that one bet of the year, and slowly we're starting to see a day like maybe Cracker Millions, like our own local event, getting some one-off custom. And no, you're a great customer of ours, I guess. Provided you're doing it safely and enjoying what you're doing, then that's perfectly fine with us.
Always. And I must say, I don't know if this is an irresponsible thing to say, but if I'm watching like an All Blacks game or a Warriors game and I've got $10 on Bodie to score the first try or whatever, it does make it more exciting. It's more of an intense watch.
Yeah,
you feel you have more skin in the game.
Yeah, look, it's we have to be careful a little bit with how we sort of push this because I don't know if you've seen, but on our Hunchland campaign, we talk about the slogans "Get your bet on," and we sort of show it as a social activity where people are betting together to increase the enjoyment of the sport. So sort of what you're talking about. I guess the line that we want to make sure we're walking carefully is to point that out, to say, hey, it's a really great social activity that can add enjoyment to sport, but that it can't become a prerequisite to your enjoyment, right? Like what we don't want to see is a customer who has to have some action on a game to still be a fan of the sport. That's when it's gone a little bit too far. So within that campaign, we actually we launched a very specific and targeted safer gambling message, which is the standard line is get your bet on, and this one is nowhere not to get your bet on, and it shows someone the whole ad is set up as if it's going to be another Hunchland ad, but it's just someone who says, hey, I'm just going to actually
sit this one out.
Yeah. And that's very direct and targeted from us. It's trying to show that, like, you don't have to have, it's not a prerequisite to enjoyment, but if it does add to your enjoyment, then hey, that's great as well. Like, that's what we're here for,
Yeah. Now, give us a peek, if you can, behind the scenes at the TAB. Say you accept a big bet, like if someone has, say, $50,000 on Argentina to beat the All Blacks. What happens? Does it have to be approved by a senior member of the team? Do you guys shit yourself when Argentina win? And
look, I mean, the action at that level nowadays is there's no way that we're taking a bet like that unless we know who the customer is and what they're all about, basically, because it's just, it's just so uncommon now to see. It used to be a little bit more prevalent, to be honest, but it's just so uncommon now for us to see action like that coming out of nowhere. So we'll usually know who it is, and it depends in terms of how we react to it. It really depends on the depth of the market. If it's on the All Blacks or if it's on English Premier League or on NBA, for example. We'll take the bet. The reason we'll take it is that it's very unlikely that in those sports that you have maybe info or a steer on how the game might go. And I mean legitimate, perfectly within the realms of legitimacy, that we don't already have. So we trust our prices and we'll take it. But, there's events like... I guess Ukrainian table tennis is the one that I would throw out there. If we're taking a $50,000 bet on, if we're getting a $50,000 bet on that, we're asking immediately, well, why? Because it's not a market that has great depth or a great understanding about where things should be lined up to. So, yeah, look, we're a betting business, and if it's coming from the right person and it's on a market that's deep enough, we'll absolutely take it. Yeah.
But if there's a big loss, like, do you have to make a phone call on Monday to someone at Entain in the UK for a please explain?
Oh man, it's interesting because where we lose our money down here in New Zealand is on Kiwi Favourite. So a few weeks ago, I woke up in the morning and checked I'm obsessed about the kind of daily results. I checked the results and went to sleep, and we were tracking quite well. Roll had gone good, the racing was fine, but woke up and there was this $600,000 sort of hole. Basically, we've been wiped out, and I was like, what is going on? So I was trying to scan through, looking at all the usual suspects, trying to figure out, as in sports, trying to figure out where it might have gone wrong. Couldn't find it, and then I was sort of got sick of trying to find it, so I was like, I'll figure this out in a sec. Flicked over to Instagram and I saw that Lydia Ko had won the gold medal.
Oh my God.
And so that's a classic example. Lydia Ko paying $70, which she was at one point. You only need a few people to put $100, $10, $20, a bunch of people putting those numbers on, and all of a sudden we're up for a huge liability. You mentioned another one, Joe Parker, when he fought, goodness, it might have been Anthony Joshua. New Zealanders love backing a home favourite, a hometown favourite. But if they're showing up as an underdog, then they love it even more. So, we carry huge liabilities on some Kiwis, which conflicts me because obviously I'm a proud Kiwi and I want to see them do well. But, it's pretty tough sometimes when they come through from a business perspective, yeah.
Yeah, and it's got to be a hard one for you in your position because, there's the social responsibility and the community responsibility, but also you want to, run a profitable business as well.
Yeah, and look, it's long term for us, I guess one thing we've got new people who come into our business, the betting game is a little bit unlike any other. Like, we can have days where we lose millions, it's just the swings and roundabouts, and you just got to trust that over a long enough period it will all kind of come through in the wash. But yeah, when you get unseasonably out of character results. I'm not saying Lydia Ko winning the gold medal is out of character, of course it's not, but when you get a run of things like that happening, the punters get well in front for a decent period, which is always interesting to watch.
Yeah, something like golf, it's so hard to bet on, eh? You look at someone like Tiger Woods, I think he won like 20% of his tournaments. Yeah. It's so hard. Yeah. Okay, now this is kind of icky, but I thought we could talk about the psychology of gambling. One of my real early podcast guests was Zach Guilford, former All Black World Cup winner, and I did a podcast with him in Christchurch when he was on home detention after like stealing money off his granddad for his gambling habit. So I've got a quote from that podcast. Now, I thought after this we can see what you know about the psychology of like a problem gambler. For me, drugs and alcohol were binges that I had to work in with my rugby career. Gambling was a constant addiction. It was mainly just horses and sport. For me, it was an adrenaline rush. You've got 10K on a horse and it wins by a nose down the straight. That's a pretty big rush. I've put 25K on horses. Wins didn't feel like a lot. There would be that automatic relief, but then it's just the same cycle again, chasing more. It didn't matter if I got up to 100K in my TAB account, there was never enough. It was never going to be enough because I was an addict chasing greed. So now he's that top 2% or the bottom 2%, however you want to frame it. Like he's a real problem gambler. What's the psychology of like someone like that?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff. I mean, I know I've listened to Zach talk about his gambling in various forums. I don't know if I'd seen the one on your pod, but I've heard him talk about it, and I think his experience is not uncommon, at least from what I've seen. So, the biggest indicator of, I guess, gambling harm, or the biggest driver of gambling harm, is poverty. So, much like many other negative health conditions, coming from a background of, I guess, poor financial literacy, of other potentially harmful and addictive behaviours in the household is often a big driver of it. And the kind of the risk-seeking behaviour that you can find that will sit alongside some of that too, and also comes with mental health. I think Zach's talked before about ADHD and his experience with that. These are all parts of the puzzle of how gambling addiction can come into someone's life. And look, I mean, Zach's experience, I think, is a combination of all of those things from what I've heard him talk publicly about. Maybe not so much the poverty side, but I know that certainly amongst the family unit, there was a lot of gambling that went on. His mental health struggles that he's talked about are obviously indicators as well. So, those are things that can, for an individual, magnify the rush, right? I mean, there's a rush associated with gambling at all levels, really. But his experience of feeling it more and wanting it more are usually driven by some of those factors that I think he's talked about quite openly. Yeah.
I mean, he was in no way, shape, or form like blaming anyone but himself.
Oh no, 100%.
Like,
yeah.
I know there's probably some people that think you guys are the bad guys, but Zach definitely wasn't doing that. Like he knows it's all on him. Do you guys get like hate mail or anything? Or if you go to functions, do you get people like bailing you up trying to?
No, not really. I mean, it's an interesting one because I talk about this all the time. Like our biggest challenge, where we get the most negative press, this might sound crazy to people, but it's when we're taking TABs out of communities. Like the worst press that we get is like the local, especially in rural communities, the way that our retail business was being run before, much like others, it's becoming less efficient. With the Entain partnership, we're sort of in a position now to change that a little bit, but it was a sort of scaling down of retail operations, and nothing ignited passion and fire, I guess, in my direction more than when a community was losing their TAB. So it's kind of the inverse. Now, I'm not saying that we get praised in the streets for our work, but that's sort of the area where I get the most flack. But look, of course, I've had family members who have talked to me directly about it, and I've had people in the health sector who have talked to me about it too. I guess the thing I always have tried with them is to I guess give them a real sense of the work that we do. And look, it's hard for gambling operators because I avoid the holier than thou kind of rhetoric that I see from maybe some of my peers offshore, where they're at pains to say, well, we've got these great processes in place, we've got these great systems, which is all very true. But I also remember the days when it wasn't true, right? And that's a reality that I think the gambling sector needs to front up to a bit more clearly. Like, the way I describe it is I think that the world probably, not the world, but many people would probably sit and think that me and my peers sit around a board table and we say, hey, should we take this guy for all he's worth? And it's just completely devoid of how we actually operate as a business. Like, there's not a single person in our business that would want or ever condone having someone who we can work out or determine has an issue with gambling with us. But at the same time, if you went around that same board table 20 years ago, that probably was some of those discussions taking place. So I try to give a lot more, I try to be understanding about people's perspectives on us and what we do, because that idea doesn't just change overnight. So I often will talk, like Zach's experience, the way that he was, and again, I'm talking about this not because he's a customer of ours, but because he's talked about it publicly before. The way he describes how he was gambling in his early days of Super Rugby, a person could not gamble like that anymore. It just isn't possible because of the checks and balances that we've put in place, and because, gambling operators, responsible ones, I think, like what we are down here, have worked out that we can't be an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff anymore. We have to put things in place that are preventative for people to avoid them getting into trouble in the first place, not to say, hey, here's a pamphlet when things go wrong.
the old pamphlet.
Oh,
yeah.
100%.
Stack of pamphlets at the casino.
Oh, yeah, here you go. Are you all right? Here's the pamphlet. Okay,
Yeah.
someone write down that we gave him the pamphlet. Like, that's just certainly not how we operate. now. But again, you go back 20 years, like, yeah, that was the game.
Well, that probably, the next thing I was going to ask was, we probably don't need to even go there. How common is it for a family member to reach out about a loved one? But I'm guessing with the measures you've got in place, it doesn't get to that point. Or
certainly far less frequently than it used to. Yeah, because I mean the game back in the day, there's always been. So one of the things I should champion, just to give context, is it used to be called responsible gambling, which I would liken to sort of like when the tobacco industry just gave the term responsible smoking. Like, the criticism there was, one, there's probably no version of smoking that's responsible, which is a key difference to gambling. But the main point of it was that it was putting all the onus back on the individual. It was like, you are either going to be responsible or irresponsible, which is a fundamentally flawed way of looking at gambling addiction. If people could behave responsibly and the owners could just sit with them and they could handle it all themselves, then we wouldn't need these protective measures in the first place. So, redefining that as safer gambling or a version of it that's framed slightly differently was sort of the first step. And look, our business, being Entain, really championed a lot of the self-help tools, right? So you have to put those in place first. You have to give people the opportunity to take the onus on themselves. But you have to have the fallback measures there. You have to be doing the monitoring. You have to understand the profile of your customer, and you have to take intervention when they might not be accessing those themselves. And look, ever since we've taken that two-pronged approach as a business and really upped our game on both sides, and I'm talking this is years ago now, but especially of late, we don't have the family interventions that we used to have. We just don't encounter them at any kind of significant rate anymore, which is great.
Yeah. So of the bans that you have now, how many would be self-imposed versus bans that you're putting on customers?
Look, so self-imposed is always going to be more prevalent. So, the best thing a person can do when they're struggling with their gambling at any given moment is to either take a break or to take a permanent exclusion, right? And there's always going to be situations where the individual gets to that conclusion before us, and even before the harm itself even shows up. So that's still the more prominent measure. The next would be, I guess, interventions from us, and then the last one, which again is a tiny percentage, would be if there was a third-party intervention. And here in New Zealand, the system is that you can go and see a counsellor. Obviously, you can get some free help services through that, and then often through those counselling sessions, they'll determine with the counsellor that gambling might be adding to their problems or whatever else, and so we'll get an approach from a counsellor to help with an exclusion for that person, and that's pretty common too, but it's not usually as direct as a family member calling and saying, hey, something's wrong here.
Sky City got in trouble recently. There was some problem gambler on a slot machine that was spent way more than what they should have, and their punishment is really steep. They've got to shut down. You know more about this than me. They've got to shut down for a few days, or
look, I may not speak too out of turn on this, but I know that I believe it was a time playing issue. So I think it was that a particular customer was sort of present in the gaming floor for too long. Which, look, I think it's always been a hard one to kind of monitor. And again, not speaking from Sky City's perspective, but from ours, someone in the retail store for a long period of time, it can be harmful, and it's something that should trigger someone to say, hey, is everything all right? But, at the same time, a long session in a store is not always a sort of harmful activity. But I think in this case, Sky City, it was found that it was over the top. And look, I think one of the real core kind of developments that they've adopted, which we're in the process of rolling out ourselves, is the use of technology to find those people faster. So they've got facial recognition technology now to, I guess, identify people who have excluded or might look underage, which is another good benefit of it. But it's also a really key tool to be able to identify people who have been there for a long period of time and to send someone out and have a conversation, which I know that Sky City are doing now. So, look, it's probably a big wake-up call, I think, for other operators to say, look, you've got to be on top of time played.
Yeah, 'cause they have to shut for a whole weekend or something, which they'll lose a serious amount of income from that. What are the consequences for you if you guys, if someone slips through the cracks?
Yeah, look, it's
quite severe like that.
Yeah, look, of course it can be. Yeah, look, we have to take on the onus and the responsibility of looking out for people. I mean, it's a large part of our remit in New Zealand. It's we're supposed to drive wagering turnover for sports and racing, as I touched on earlier, but it can never be at the expense of people's sufferings from undue harm. So, look, if we were found to be in breach in the same way, I doubt that the penalties would be any different for us as what Sky City have had. And look, we've got 500 venues. That's an awful lot of ground to cover. It's an awful lot of staff to train. I worked in a TAB retail store, and back then I had to look at a list of people, 400 photos every day before my shift, and try to remember them all in case one of them came in the store. Like, you're on a hiding to nowhere back then, But the advent of facial rec, obviously, now those faces go into a machine a cloud system that can identify them in real time through camera tech. So it's vastly improved, but it's a tough job.
Yeah, unless someone comes in with like fake moustache and
Yeah.
glasses.
Oh, genuinely,
No, I'm definitely not him.
Yeah, and it was like the challenge back then was, we'd have customers who were lifetime exclusion customers, of course, and you would get one photo, but they could be on that list for 10 years. So you try to pick up someone from a small photo that was taken 10 years ago. It's not particularly easy. But as I say, technology's again helping us in this journey to kind of keep this all in check.
Yeah. One thing like occasional customers like me would notice is you get these notifications about specials like spend $50, we'll give you another $50 or whatever. What's the goal with these?
It's interesting because it comes up a lot. Like, people would think that it's like an inducement, kind of trying to get you gambling. The way that we structure promos, and most gambling businesses do, is it's loss insulation. Basically, it's especially in the current environment, customers losing 3 races straight, they're usually calling it a day. So what our specials are usually aimed at doing is finding a way to get that money back into your pocket so that you can keep going and keep enjoying the product. We want people, when they take a bet, to have a enjoyable experience that lasts them a decent amount of time. So it's sort of a recycling of your spend, basically, to keep you engaged more, to not have it be a 1 or 2 race sort of thing. You extend that $20 out to 3 or 4 or 5 races. That's sort of the theory behind generosity, and it seems to be going pretty well.
Yeah, because I know anyone that's got it in for you guys, they'll think there's a sinister meaning behind it. The idea is to get people hooked.
Oh, for sure. And look, I think there's versions of it that have shown up in a way that are problematic. So I look at what's still happening overseas. If you're giving someone a $1,000 sign-up bonus at some of these online casinos, which people do get, and then when they put that $1,000 in and they get the bonus to get the money out, they have to play X hours before they can withdraw. Like, these are behaviours that are not conducive to what I'm describing here. These are things that are designed to get you in at a higher price point than what you would have liked, and to keep you locked in there for a longer period than what would otherwise be acceptable. Those versions of it are problematic. I guess one thing I do try to caution down here in New Zealand is not thinking that because that's what's happening somewhere, that's what we're doing as well. It's the same with advertising. I talk about, like, I've been in the UK and God, and even in it's hard even for me as someone who loves punting to sit there and say that that's a healthy amount of advertising for people to be seeing. Like, there's 70 operators operating in a small space, and it's probably too much. But what I try to remind people down here when they talk about gambling advertising is that it's just us. It's only the TAB advertising down here, and we're not running at the kind of frequency that you see anywhere near offshore. And it's one of the great benefits of having a sole operator in the market is that you don't get inundated with ads.
Do you feel like Lotto gets a free pass compared to you guys? I said, your ads are on TV a lot, and I know they're polarizing for some people. And then Lotto's ones, and they're selling the stream of what you do if you won $40 million.
Oh,
Do you?
I don't know if they get a free. I mean, I think, and God, someone better fact check me on this, but I think Lotto has been the most complained about ad previously.
Really?
Yeah. So I think it does. I think it does get a lot of attention. I mean, I think the difference with Lotto, which is everyone will probably understand this, is that it's just not seen as gambling to people. You know what I mean? It's seen as sort of this. It's community good. It's the give back is much better understood for Lotto than what it is for TAB. We fund racing and grassroots sports and professional sport in New Zealand to a really high degree, but most people don't know that. They think it's just a corporate business that's soaking up the profit, whereas Lotto's done a really fantastic job of helping people understand that it does go back out. But more than just that, it's just that form of gambling, being lottery, is just not seen the same as wagering or casino gambling or class 4s. yeah, it just doesn't hit the same kind of note. But you know, according to the definition of gambling, it's very much gambling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? I suppose because I don't know. Maybe it's a psychology thing because if you're having a bet on a horse or a sports game, there's a chance you're going to win. Whereas Lotto, you pretty much know you're not going to win.
Yeah.
You're basically throwing the money. I don't know how the psychology of that works.
Yeah, well, it's why I've never been a Lotto player myself, but it's because I feel like I have probably too good a grip on statistics, if that makes sense. But it's each to their own, you know. I guess it's the thing. People enjoy and dabble in all sorts of activities for reasons that I can't understand. So I'm not going to try to trivialize what people do, but yeah, it's been incredible to see. I mean, look, we don't actually have a huge crossover of our players to Lotto either, which does show you that it is a different kind of activity. You know, when the Lotto jackpot gets up, it doesn't mean that we have a bad week. It seems to be that our customers continue on. So, you know, different psychology probably as you described, yeah.
Yeah, because that's when I'll buy a Lotto ticket, when it's a highly publicised Powerball draw, at 30 million or whatever, and then so I'll buy my $30 ticket or however much it is, then I'll immediately regret it the next day. It's like, of course I wasn't going to win.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I guess one thing that, and again, this is not a shot at Lotto by any stretch because, like, you know, they're great, but I mean, like, one thing that we try to be really cautious of is that gambling should never be, especially wagering, should never be seen as a way to relieve financial pressure, right? Like, it's not that. It's a form of entertainment where it's more than likely you are going to lose at what you're doing. But, you know, I think that the challenge sometimes with maybe the nature of the way that Lotto is that it's a life-changing amount of money. So it becomes hard to not present the end goal as something that will change your life, you know. But it is a challenge for them, I think, because, you know, Lotto is not a sound way to alleviate financial pressure, nor is betting on sports or racing.
Yeah. Where do you see Entain being in like the next 5 to 10 years?
That's a good question. Look, the team at Entain, like, if you were to meet them, the thing you'll take away is that we are very passionate about racing and sport. You know, what we want to see is those sectors thriving down here in New Zealand. On the racing side especially, I think that it's a chronically undertold story just how incredible the breeding sector is down here in New Zealand, how we mix it up on the racing scene with like the absolute best in the world off of, you know, this country that's got hardly any scale, a small population, you know, all the challenges that come with being so far removed geographically from everyone. You know, we all want to see that thrive, and, you know, it's certainly why I'm in the job, and I think that that's why everyone else is. So we want to play our role in building those sectors up to be sort of the best things that they can be. And, you know, we've been involved in things like the Entain Industry Awards to try and develop pathways for people to get into it, and yeah, just really deliver. And I guess how we do that is by delivering a good product, a wagering product to our customers. You know, something that we can be proud of. I say, my old boss, a guy named Mike Todd, who is very, very influential in my career, he said to me that number 8 wire shit don't work anymore. Kiwis don't want to accept second rate. We use top end apps. We use high quality products. Like, the idea that we can offer up to New Zealanders something that's below par relative to the rest of the world just doesn't fly anymore. And so, you know, we know as a business that for us to, I guess, deliver on our vision, we have to deliver amazing products to people, and that's what we want to do.
You may have just answered this before, but I'll ask it just in case there's a different answer. What do you find most rewarding about your role? Oh,
look, it is the industry. So, like, it's hard to explain. I thought about kind of this concept on the way over, thinking it might be something you'd ask. Like, from when I was a graduate in this job, like, I was very much, and I think this was a somewhat unique experience, at least the intensity of how I felt it. Like, I always felt like there were people who relied on me to do a good job. And in this case, like, the stakeholders are the racing and sports industries, you know, the people who are playing amateur sport who need funding, the people who are in the racing game who are, you know, struggling to make ends meet. I always felt a very real obligation to those people, and I still do. You know, and I think it comes with so much pressure because, you know, you sort of feel like you're carrying the weight of the world, which you're not always. But I always felt like doing a good job for them was the thing I wanted most, basically, out of anything in the world, you know. And I guess what I find rewarding, especially now with the Entain partnership in full swing, is that we have a realistic shot of doing the best job that we could have. So look, that's probably the part of it that I find most rewarding, is when I see, you know, them getting a leg up, really. Yeah, and then within our own business, like I said, we're the biggest broadcaster of live sport in New Zealand, and when we were trying to scrap together, rub two coins together to make a third to survive, we had a whole broadcasting division that weren't able to be broadcasters, just became a film the next race, move on. And yeah, I get a lot of satisfaction from seeing them being able to do good work with good tools. And I'm a proud Kiwi, and I want to see New Zealand be able to mix it up with the best in the world and be given the settings to do it, So all of that is what I find really rewarding, I suppose.
Yeah, how long are you going to be around for? Must be a stressful job.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. Like it's easy when you do love it, but look, I think that for me, I'm only 33, so that's probably the other thing people should know about me. I'm still quite young, and I've still got a.
Oh yeah, shit, you've done a lot.
Yeah, I don't know, I've done a lot, but no. I have I think I say this all the time, I have the insane privilege of looking a lot older than I was. So when I walk into these settings where I probably didn't belong, no one really questioned it, at least not visually, which is a privilege I think about all the time, that not everyone had the benefit of. But yeah, I'm only 33, and so, I really want to see this part of my life out. I want to see this industry do well. I want to see New Zealanders be given a great product. I want to see our products be safer than they've ever been, and I want to make sure that we're on a pathway towards sustainability for all of those things. So I guess when that's over, hopefully I can move on to the next thing. But for now, I'll be sticking around. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, well, this has been really enjoyable today, Cam. Thanks so much for coming over. Thanks for answering those questions. Yeah. Hopefully, anyone that's got an issue with the TAV wouldn't probably listen to a podcast like this anyway, because they'll accuse it of being propaganda or whatever. But I'm looking forward to working with Betcha, and I've really enjoyed having you on the podcast today to answer some of those curly questions.
No problem at all. And look, we're really excited about this partnership, and hopefully your viewers can get a sense that we are, that we're legitimately care about the stuff that we've talked about today. And if they ever see me and want to have a chat, and just feel free, I'm very approachable. And yeah, it's been good fun.
Be careful what you throw out.
Yeah, well, no, I mean it though, honestly. You'll realise that we are not faceless corporates that sit around a board table trying to find ways to pinch money out of people's pockets. It's just not who we are. So anyone who wants to come up and have a chat, feel free.
Oh yeah, and you guys are, let's not forget, you guys are under intense scrutiny as well.
Oh, of course.
There's people breathing down your necks, right?
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely, and for good reason. I don't ever I get frustrated about that side of things. I mean, we are given a great responsibility in New Zealand to be able to sell products like that we do to the New Zealand public should come with scrutiny. And look, it absolutely does, and it's something that we embrace. So we just got to keep doing a good job.
Cam Rodger, Managing Director, Entain New Zealand. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Don.